Good evening and welcome. We're grateful that you're here tonight. This is week 10 of our Summer Big Questions series, and I'm excited tonight to welcome two of my friends, Beverly Ross and Josh Ross. And we'll introduce our topic here in just a minute and kind of tell you what we're going to be talking about a little more. But I want to start off by letting them tell a little bit about themselves so you can know who they are and know a little bit about their story as we begin our conversation tonight. So Beverly, why don't you start by telling us where you live, what you do for work, a little bit about your family, and then we'll let Josh do the same thing.
Okay, I live in Decatur, Texas, over by Fort Worth. I have a ministry here, Wise County Christian Counseling. We're a nonprofit counseling group. We see people on a sliding scale, and we have been absolutely smashed during this pandemic. We are getting tons of people in dealing with some depression, some anxiety, confusion, fear, but also a lot of grief. 2 years ago, I opened a grief center named Jenny's Hope, named after my daughter that died in 2010. And today is Jenny's 42nd birthday. So I am in and out of some joy and some grief today, but definitely fighting to land in joy. Our grief center, we work with a lot of children, their families in grief, and try to help them find words and language to deal with the loss of death. But we also know, and I want to be really bold about this, that death is not the only grief-producing event. There are a lot of things in life that bring up hard emotion for us. And I believe that, man, you guys have done a great job at your church talking about some of those things. We've got to do a good job in our churches and in our faith talking about what do you do when those hard emotions pop up. My husband is the pulpit minister here in Decatur, Texas. My daughter, that I already talked about, is my firstborn. Josh, who is joining us, is my secondborn. And then I have Jonathan, who lives here in Decatur with his family. And Jonathan is a firefighter at DFW. So super, super excited to be with you and to see how the night unfolds. Thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Beverly, you'll remember church was with us last summer, and when I was planning this summer, I wanted her to come back, and due to the fact that we were doing this virtually, I thought, well, let's also include Josh, who is a friend of mine and lives a little further away than the Dallas-Fort Worth area at this point, so made it a little easier for him to be with us. So Josh, why don't you do the same, kind of tell us where you are and what you do and a little bit about your family, and then we'll kick off the conversation.
Yeah, well, I was a deprived middle child. Just no attention. Nobody even knew I was around growing up. Man, I raised in a great family. Doug, you and I was trying to think before I jumped on here. I bet we've known each other since I was 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I think are you 2 years older than me? Are you a 97 grad?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, you and I spent a lot of time together there in the mid-90s, shooting hoops late at night, playing NBA Live 95 on Sega.
Mm-hmm.
And then, got to hang out at ACU some.
Let's stop there with the mid-90s stories, though. Let's just keep
that. And thank goodness cell phones weren't around, because I don't know if either of us would have jobs today if they were. But man, from ACU, I knew from the age of 18, preaching is what I wanted to do. And it's my parents, even though my dad at that point had been preaching for about a decade, I never felt pressure to go into the quote unquote family business. Mm-hmm. Just the movement of God in my life. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I went to college. I knew there was plan A. There was no plan B. Didn't have a minor college. And I wanted to preach. I wanted to pastor a church. And so out of ACU, I did 3 years of a grad program and then went down to Houston, where I lived for 2 years. We loved where we weren't looking to move, but had an opportunity in Memphis that came up. We had not spent much time in Memphis at all, my wife and I, but we chose to relocate to Memphis back in 2008. So we moved, at the time, just one grandkid outside of Texas, away from grandparents. They still have not forgiven us. They give us a little grace. But man, for 12 years now, we've been in Memphis, Tennessee. We call this home. I still have a great love and affinity for the Dallas Mavericks, but the Memphis Grizzlies have definitely grown in our hearts. So man, I'm married, 2 kids. I got a teenager now. Truett turned 13 back in May. I have a 10, almost 11-year-old.
That's good.
That's about it.
That's good. Yeah. So those of you who are watching, Josh referenced that we grew up together in our middle school and high school years. His dad, Beverly's husband, Rick, was the preaching minister at the church where we all were at the time. And so Beverly has some stories, and Josh and I have some stories, and we're going to not talk about any of those tonight, but maybe off the record we can share more. But certainly I'm grateful.
Hey, can I jump in? Let me say this real quick about my mom, because I think somebody watching this could be a blessing to them. And I may have a couple of years off on this, but I do not remember, Mom, I don't remember you speaking much. And when I say speaking, doing like speaking at ladies groups, women retreats, I don't remember you doing that at all until your late 30s, maybe even 40. You were a stay-at-home mom until Jonathan went to kindergarten. You went back and got your degree from there. You were a public school teacher, kindergarten, first grade. Then you decided to get your master's degree and became a counselor. And that was later on in life. But it wasn't until around the age of 40 that you began to speak. So now, I mean, we're looking at 20, 25 years or so where that has been what you've devoted so much of your life to through counseling and ministry. So what has helped me when I talk to other people about this is there are times when the spiritual gift inside of someone manifests itself at a young age. Like, Doug, hey, the age of 16, you need to be a youth minister one day. But there are times where that gift may not come to life until later on in life. It's just a matter of being faithful to who God has called us to be. And there are times that there's a gift inside of us that doesn't come to life because the community around them hasn't brought it to life. And there are times where God doesn't place a gift until later on in life. So I'm not trying to get into preaching mode here, but my mom is a testament to what a lot of people may be struggling with too. Like, they may not feel like what that niche is for them or their place in the kingdom of God is. Your place is to be faithful, and whether this mighty gift comes that blesses thousands or not, be faithful, and who knows when a gift may come to life. So there we go.
That's good. Good word there. Yeah. And so this, your family's been a great blessing to my life and my journey and story. And so I've been excited about having this conversation. I appreciate y'all giving me a little bit of time this evening. So our topic tonight, well, we have kind of a guide here, but we'll see where the conversation goes. With the three of us, we may end up in a different place than we start. But I want to start by talking about something that you guys have happening the first part of September the 1st, and which is a book that is titled "Scarred Hope," correct? And which is a book that Josh and Beverly have co-authored. Josh wrote a book called Scarred Faith that some of you that are watching might have read back in 2013. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, that's right.
And so there's obviously a little similarity in the title. I pulled my copy off the shelf so you know that I bought it, physical copy here, and that people could see it if they didn't know what it was. But talk a little bit about the title of the book. Maybe is there a connection to the first book? And then really just kind of what compelled you guys to write this, and I think some of what you'll share based on what I know will maybe kind of lead us into the next part of our conversation. So, Beverly, you want to start?
Well, I want to hear Josh's take on it, on the way he came up with the title. It was his idea and his plan, and I'm so grateful that he shared it with me and invited me in with him. Josh, you want to talk about the title?
Sure. Yeah, man. This came about fall of 2018. My family, we were at the beach. So the opening pages of the book, I tell this story when my mom called and told us she had been diagnosed with cancer, which is a call nobody wants to get. Now, we knew at the time they caught it early. We felt really good about her prognosis. Survival rates are high. Yet anytime, cancer is inside somebody, who's in your circle, I mean, you start thinking about life. I remember I called her the next day because my mom, I mean, we had processed a lot about grief and suffering and pain and joy and hope. And I knew there was, and off and on now for probably 25 years, my mom has talked about the possibility of writing a book. And it was the day after that I called her and I said, Mom, I think now's the time. I think now is the time for you to, there's a book inside of you. Let's get it out. So we started dreaming about what that could look like. And I think from the get-go, I think the first conversation we had, I said, why don't we do like a Scarred Faith Part 2? Some kind of extension of a scarred faith where, I mean, the image still works. The idea of scars, they're healed wounds. Every scar has a story. There's not a scar we bear. Doug, I think you have a scar on your hand from
good memory.
From childhood, where I think an iron fell on your hand or something like that. I have a scar across my lip. Every scar we bear, whether it's physical or social, emotional, has a story that goes with it. So I also knew that the word hope had been a big word for my mom and my dad, how they go about trying to live their life. And I thought, well, let's just do a book called Scarred Hope, where mom can tell some of her story of her grief journey, shares some of her expertise and wisdom from clinical work. And then just together, we could put together something that could be helpful and practical and equipping, whether people are walking a grief journey because of death or divorce, or just a way to help churches navigate and know how to talk about pain. So that's kind of how it started. And then it probably took us 3 to 6 months to kind of have a working outline. And here we are, I guess 18, 20 months later, and we're within a few weeks from launching this thing. So in many ways, I would say this was what I've tried to do over the last year, was to prop up my mom, to get something inside of her onto paper so other people could read it.
That's cool. Yeah, you want to add anything to that, Beverly?
Well, it has been a journey for me because I hadn't done much writing really since college. One of the things that Josh said to me early, which has been so helpful, is, Mom, when you're writing, you've got to learn to write for the eye and not for the ear. I love relationships with people. And even right now, I find myself staring into your eyes. When Josh is talking, I'm looking at him, I'm going, do you understand what I'm saying? Or are you following? Or I may say, which I'm sure I said at your church, like, truth. And I mean that. I want my audience to go, yeah, truth. I believe that too. And so it's been so challenging for me to write it and put a period at the end of it, wondering, are you going to get this? Does this make sense to you? Because I believe that grief, I believe that pain can make our souls, our hearts so fragile that I want to make sure I speak words that breathe life. I don't believe that all of our language around grief has been very helpful. I think some of it has been almost faith destroying or faith beating, that when people have a doubt or when people just don't like pain, that we rush them in churches, we rush them to feel joy. And I do believe that joy and grief can go together, but I still think you have to feel all the feels. And so giving myself permission to write about my own pain has been a challenge. It's been a challenge, but it's been so helpful for me. And I am so prayerful it'll be helpful for you as you're able to read it and explore it and ask some questions.
Doug, the third section of our book is one I'm really excited about. It's different than anything I've ever done before, but it's a Q&A dialogue. I shouldn't even say Q&A, but it's a dialogue that my mom and I have together, 10 dialogue and conversations about phrases or statements that are made when people suffer. So we take a chapter where we just talk about, and I'm just going to read some of these to you. Does time heal? Does everything happen for a reason? How many children do you have? So my mom and dad had to think about, what is their bio going to say after they had lost a child? Statements like, don't be sad, your loved one's in a better place. How do you cultivate a healthy marriage when you're grieving? When should you seek help Can Christians go to God angry? What about the statement, I know exactly how you feel? Does God cry? And how can I be a faithful friend to others who are grieving? And in all 10 of those, I think there are moments people are going to laugh, and hopefully moments where people are going to take notes. We just want to help people think through language we use without making people feel guilty for things we've all said in moments when we're with people who are experiencing pain. Because the last thing we want is for people not to say anything because I may say the wrong thing.
Right.
But let's help people think through vocabulary and language and what do we mean when we say certain things. And I think that section has a lot of potential. I think it'll be a lot of fun for people, and hopefully they'll kind of hear both of my mom and I, just our voices, and it'll be like you're invited to a dining room table or a living room just to hear us process some of these conversations together.
No, that's cool. I like that idea a lot. And I think I've talked with both of y'all, I think at different points, but I think that those things that people say, I think people mean well, right? Usually whenever they're saying whatever it is they're saying, but they don't know what to say. And then words just kind of start coming out of their mouth. And, and then it maybe got them in, it's gotten all of us in trouble at some point because we go, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way, or I shouldn't have said that at all, maybe. So that's a cool idea to include in that book. So I'm curious, this is not on our rough draft here of our questions, but how would you say that the experience that y'all have been on and the scarred hope that you have, you mentioned, Beverly, that grief isn't the only, death isn't the only grief producing event. And I'm curious, because I know there'll be people watching who, they haven't lost a daughter, a sister to death, a spouse, but their grief has been produced by some other event, right? And so how might this book be helpful to someone who still is dealing with grief, dealing with loss, trauma in some way in their life, but it wasn't produced by the loss of life, of a daughter or sister or spouse or child or something like that? Can you speak to that?
That is a great question. I believe that and America is all I know, so I'm not picking on us, but I do believe that we in America compare everything. I mean, we compare cars, we compare wedding rings, we compare hairstyles, shoes. I mean, we also compare pain. And so one of the things that I heard early on is, I can't talk to you about my pain because my pain is not as bad as yours. Yeah. And I heard other people in grief groups say, I can't talk to you about mine because you won't understand mine because mine is worse.
Right.
And I am a champion of stop comparing pain. We've just got to show up and hear each other's stories. Mm-hmm. We've got to be able to hold space and just go, that must have really hurt. That must really feel bad. And stop ranking. Because even if you come out on top, that's not helpful for you. And if you come out on the bottom, that's not helpful for you. Because there's always somebody that has it worse. There's always somebody that to us would have it better. So let's just walk together. Let's just show up. I was with a woman earlier today, and we were talking about pain and about how death may not be the worst. How maybe broken relationships. I mean, we could explore this of pains that don't ever end. Right. And not that grief has a pain that ends. I mean, even my own language with that, but those heartaches where we as believers, our jobs become to walk together, to speak words of faith, to shore each other up. Because to end this journey, to end this walk on dirt with faith is the ultimate goal. We're walking toward hope together, no matter what the pain is. So what we've got to do in churches is watch our language of making things better too quickly and making people feel out of place when we're at a gathering because they don't have joy today. Mm-hmm. We've got to figure out how can we speak? I've got this for you. I'm with you. I'm praying for you. Breathe in peace. Before we rush people away. Our goal in churches is to build each other, to give each other tools to walk in faith.
Oh, that's good. And I feel like that, I don't know when it happened. I wasn't paying attention, I don't think, but there seems to have been a shift, at least in a lot of the churches that I know, that there was a time when the answer was, the goal was to give people an answer,
Mm.
to help people feel like that they had some assurance of whatever with whatever their question was, right? Their doubt or their grief, loss that they were carrying. And I feel like that we've grown, which I think is a positive thing. I think y'all do too. And like we've grown more comfortable with the mystery of the journey. I like how you said that like the goal is to walk toward hope, and
Yes.
that's not always a real clear path. With that, we know what the goal, where the target is that we're aiming at, but it's not always going to be real clear as we get there. Along the way, there's going to be stuff that happens, and but knowing that God has gotten down into the mess of life with us, and He's walking that road with us, I think is a different way to think about it than I think maybe at some point in the past a lot of people Christians generally talked about, and so you would hear people they were grieving, but they didn't know who to talk to because they didn't think they could bring it up because, well, nobody's got I don't want an answer. So they would just kind of stay quiet or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But has that been, have you seen that to be true? Either one of you guys seen that to be true? I mean, are we better at kind of creating that space, holding space, as to use your phrase, Beverly, of like allowing people just to know that it's okay to not be okay today, like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
I definitely think we're better. I don't think there is an end to it, meaning I don't think we've arrived there. I think we're still, the phrase I've used over and over again in the last 125 months is how long it's been for us, is we're figuring it out.
Yeah.
We're figuring it out. And so if it might work for one person, it might be a great thing to say, and it might not be a helpful thing to say to someone else.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we've got to look into each other's eyes, and we also have to know in our own spirits when to circle back and go, that's not even what I meant to say. Tell me what that felt like for you. Because there's not one answer that fits pain. We're walking it, we're listening, we're watching each other, we're hearing. I love the way you said it in the unknown. Since I don't know that I've said in the last 10 and a half years, I don't know, more than ever. I've said it over and I don't know. I just don't know. This pandemic has been, I don't know. And I think really and truly, most of the time in life, we just get to pretend like we know things. I mean, we don't know much, but we hang on tight to what we do know. And that's not many things, but it's deep things that we know.
That's good. Yeah. You want to add anything there, Josh?
I think I'd add a couple of things, and specifically to the book. I mean, we work hard to broaden how we talk about grief and pain and suffering, because all of us are going to walk that journey. We're all going to be inducted into some kind of club that involves pain at some point in our lives. And the way I often talk about it, whether I'm talking in a group on like Sunday mornings where there are 4 or 5 generations, or even when I'm speaking to college groups or sometimes teens, is I want to help equip people with what foundation you're going to function from for the rest of your life now, for when those days come, you're ready. One of the hardest things I think for people to do is get in the middle of a storm and then try to build your foundation. Not that it can't be done, but it's hard. So the way I often talk about it is, for all of us, there are going to be events that happen in life, whether it's someone dying close to us or bankruptcy or COVID-19. There are going to be events that happen so how we walk in the future with God is not going to look like how we've walked in the past with God. And it's not because God has changed, but life has changed. So how we try to navigate whatever road, pain, or tragic, whatever it may be, how we navigate it and move into the future, it's going to be different than it was in the past. And this is true for individuals. It's true sometimes for churches as we navigate whether it's social issues or racial inequality or whatever it may be. Yesterday, I put the finishing touches on the last chapter of our book, and it's about the section 2. We talk about how grief is a friend of joy, and there's a chapter on grief as an optometrist, and grief is a common language. And yesterday, I wrote about how grief is a teacher. And one thing I talk about in that chapter is I think the way the Bible even talks about pain is the Bible doesn't spend as much time on the why as the Bible does on the how. I don't think God is answering everyone's why, but I think God is working hard to give us a how. Like, here's how you keep trying to live a faithful life, even when you don't know where the finish line is to COVID-19 or where the finish line is to any of the suffering we may feel. There is a how that the Bible prepares us for, even when we don't get the answer to the why. And I've learned to be okay with that in my life. Like, that doesn't damage my faith. That if anything, that encourages me and inspires me to keep going.
That's really good. Y'all kind of talked about this a little bit, but talk a little bit about the word hope in that title. And I know the word hope is even in the counseling center. Is the grief center called Jenny's Hope? Mm-hmm. It's Wise County
Christian Counseling. Yes, it's a mouthful. Yes.
Okay. So talk about the word hope and kind of why that. And I think, Josh, you kind of alluded to it even there with the how being, more prominent in Scripture than the why. But I'm curious just to get you guys to expound a little bit on the word hope and why that's meaningful, both in the title of the book and then also just in the journey that y'all have been on as well.
Josh, you want to go or you want me to?
Go ahead, because I'm curious. When you landed on the name Jenny's Hope, were there other names that you were wrestling with too? That was it. It was just Jenny's Hope, and
yeah. Jenny struggled with secondary infertility, and hope was a huge word for her.
Yeah.
Of course, when her struggle with infertility started, she was hoping she would have another baby, and through prayer and her own journey, her hope became in Jesus. And so there was a switch in her favorite verse and her life verse, which is now mine. And I end everything. If it's a speaking event, if it's a counseling session, Jenny's Hope, our sessions with young children, we quote, if it's a Brene Brown group, we quote Romans 15:13 at the end of everything. And it says this: may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Yes. And so what had happened with Jenny is we had gifted each other with mugs, hangings, lots of plaques. I have a ring that says hope on it. The whole time Jenny was in the hospital, my question to doctors, to nurses was, is there hope? And I meant for her life, is there hope? Yeah. And at the beginning, we had a nurse that was our night nurse, and she was like, yes, we're going to do this. There's hope. The morning, February 22nd, right before we knew that the end was coming, there was an infectious disease doctor in, and he looked at me and he said, do not give up hope. We're going to be able to find this. We're going to be able to switch this around. And I went, I'm not giving up hope. I'm all over this. I've got hope. And then within 3 hours, we're walking out of the hospital, and I'm like, what about hope? What happened to hope? And so I knew I was going to have to dig in, and it was a deep spiritual journey for me to explore and rediscover the roots of my own hope as I had watched Jenny discover her own. But the road to Emmaus is a beautiful story about hope, where we believe husband and wife were walking after Jesus died. And after his resurrection, they just didn't know that. And they're like, I picture them like this. We had hoped he was the one. We had hoped he was the one who would save us. We had hoped he was the one that would release us. And Jesus, our hope, was walking right with them. And hope was alive. And he was hearing that. And I believe there is a huge shift in us when we're talking about our lowercase h hopes. I can hope really, really good things that may not come true while my feet walk on dirt. But I cannot take my eyes off of the living hope, because that's what gives energy to my soul. And some of those hopes that I'm wanting so much to come true may not even come true while my feet walk on dirt.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean they won't come true. It just means everything is in Jesus. It's with him, and it's in our faith, and it's in us. What Paul calls him the living hope, Peter calls him the hope of glory, or do I have that backwards? I have that backwards. Peter calls him living hope. Paul calls him hope of glory. He is our hope. He's our capital H. He is the one that breathes life into us. And I believe that hope is the one. And so as soon as Josh mentioned the name of the book being Scarred Hope, I knew that was what I wanted to jump on. I had no doubt when it was that Jenny's hope was what I wanted the grief center to be, because I knew Jenny loved children, and I knew that she would want the hope of Jesus to be given to these children as they walk out their own grief roads. And I feel like it's honoring of her. In my mind, every time I see it and every time I know it, it's Jenny's Jesus that we're presenting to children. Whether they come in faith or they don't, they're going to see Jesus in us as the volunteers there.
That's awesome. And I do feel like that's a good articulation even of what Josh was talking about with the how. It's like we have, on this road that we walk, I mean, there's going to be an endless amount. And I like how you said it, Josh, that we're all going to be inducted into this club and most of the time none of us will have asked to be inducted into it, and I think that if we can prepare that foundation ahead of time. Another thing I remember Beverly, you saying last summer when you were here speaking, was that we prepare in the light for what we'll do when darkness comes, which I think is kind of what Josh was saying too, that, we have to prepare ahead of time. But when we're on that road, looking out ahead, the how that we're going to be able to make it is that hope that we cling to. So I appreciate you all saying that. This is a little different question I want to kind of ask, but I'm curious, as you've thought about your own personal transformation, whether it be with Jenny's death or other things that have happened in life, Beverly, your cancer diagnosis, or other grief-producing kinds of events that we've all gone through. I know I have heard and been taught by others and also experienced in my own life how much suffering has transformed my own life. And I'm curious just about, to get y'all to respond to the thought of, do people have to go through suffering in order to be transformed? What has your experience been with grief, with suffering of any kind, and then the transformation that follows or that happens as a result of that? And, have you been able to see in your own life and the lives of others that those two things seem to be kind of hand in hand most of the time?
I think our goal is always transformation as people who follow the way of the Christ, of Jesus. Our goal is transformation. Our goal is never to suffer. We don't want to. We don't like it. But I also don't want it to be misunderstood that people who have suffered hard have a corner on transformation. Again, I don't think we can compare that suffering. And so for some people that I've worked with in the counseling room, it may be the silence of hard depression and anxiety. Nobody sees that. It doesn't necessarily make sense. It's hard. It's not a story that they have to tell when they're in the midst of it. Like they don't have a monument with the suffering date on it, like I do at Oaklawn Cemetery. It's different. I think I remember I was at Josh's house and I was exploring. We were at dinner one night and I was exploring. I said, I believe that the Lord prepared us to suffer. And Josh leaned back in this way that when he does this, something's about to come and you just hear it for me. And he said, Mom, I believe that God prepares all of his children to suffer. And I do believe that the human existence brings us into different components of suffering. And it's in that suffering that we're able to get rid of pieces of us. I don't believe that God wants his children to suffer, but I don't believe he wastes a moment of it. He sees it and he hears it, and he uses everything that the power of darkness throws at us for his own glory and for our redemption.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I think, yeah, that's good. I think I would say, I mean, there were even early Christians who would go to the extreme to abuse their bodies, to think that through doing this, I'm connecting to God because it's the road of suffering. And I don't think any of us would, subscribe to that. I do think suffering is necessary for transformation, but suffering is going to look differently.
Yeah.
If we are followers of Jesus, I don't think you can be transformed into the image of Christ if you are not in close proximity to some form of suffering. This may not be from your own life. It may not be because you were diagnosed with an illness or someone in your life died. It may be because by following Jesus, you're living in proximity to the oppressed, to the marginalized, to the addict, whoever it may be. So for some people, that may be what suffering has looked like for them, as they've come alongside of other people who've been dealt a hand in life they never asked for. And through that, we are being transformed in some kind of way. And I think the way the Bible and the New Testament talk about transformation is, it's not if suffering's going to happen in your life, but as we suffer, here's the kind of people we're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to that point, that I'm thinking of a conversation I was having with my oldest son the other day, who is at the stage where he's noticing other people's vehicles, the kind of truck he would love to have. And, he's growing up in a family that mostly has always driven used cars and, and he's got a job right now. And so we've been talking to him about, giving some of his income. And he said the other day to me, this is not a statement that I'm not patting my wife and I on the back. I'm not patting Lana and I on the back with this statement. I'm just making, to your point, Josh, like it's also just when we're walking with Jesus, there will be decisions that we make that are different than the world around us. And he was sort of lamenting the fact that he had to give some of his money, which I think is a normal 15-year-old experience, right? And so it gave us an opportunity to talk to him about how we've seen God be faithful when we've continued to give faithfully, and God has also always taken care of us. And but I said something to him that I thought of when you were saying that, as you were, I think about, it could be the loss of someone, it could be walking with an addict or someone who's grieving, or it could be something we experience, something that someone else experiences that we are involved with because of our proximity to Jesus. It could also be decisions we make because of the relationship that we have with the Lord, that the world around us is not, they're not embracing those same things. And so, we had that conversation and started talking about how there will be things you have to say no to because you follow Jesus, because you're going to live at a different level of income. You're going to live at a different level of income, a little different way, because some of the money you're going to make is always going to go to the kingdom of God, and that's a hard thing. Like, people who may have been following Jesus for a long time, giving may be a part of our regular rhythm. But, if you're learning that at 15 and you haven't had a lot of money that's come to your personal, through into your personal hand from your own work and your own experience, then it's hard to let that go. So I think it's an important point to make, to highlight that it looks a lot of different ways. And then Beverly, as you said earlier, we generally avoid pain. We don't like, it makes our hearts fragile, is the way I wrote it down that you said earlier. And so we know that, we know that, I think we can almost sometimes see it coming, and we go, I think we do that with hard conversations. We do that with broken relationships. There's moments where we just go, yeah, that's going to be too painful for me to deal with, so I'm just not going to do it, but that it will be a necessary thing, I think, is a really important point to emphasize that you've both mentioned. So I appreciate that. I'm curious, as you thought about your relationship with God, I'm going to kind of combine the next couple of questions we were going to talk about. Your relationship with God over the last 10 years, since Jenny's death, but also just on the life you've lived during that time. How do you, as you reflect on that, and I'm sure some of this is probably in the book, but how is your relationship with the Lord different? I'm specifically even thinking about prayer. How has prayer changed as a result of suffering, and your experience with suffering and grief and clinging to hope? Talk about that, just both your relationship in general, but also specifically the prayer language that you use in communication with God. So,
Josh, why don't you take that one?
I would say I was, the three of us spent a lot of time in the same church there for a few years. I mean, for Doug and I, it was formative years in our lives. And I don't remember getting this in my, I don't remember getting this from you or Dad. I just kind of the church culture that I was raised in. There was a time, and it may have just been my interpretation of it, was there were a lot of things I needed to do in my life and a lot of things I needed to believe in my life to be a faithful Christian. And as I've gone through different things in my life or different decisions we have made, the list of things I need to sign on to keep getting smaller and smaller. But as that list has grown smaller, those things that I bank on have intensified. Like my belief in them has never been more than it is. And I would say, Jenny's death, and maybe even a few years before that, as I just was processing different forms of pain, the kind of the things in life that I bank on when it comes to theology and who the church is meant to be have greatly grown, but there are just not many of them. Now, Jenny's death also came at a time where 3 weeks before she died is when Casey and I made a decision to relocate into an underprivileged community in Memphis. And I would say, really, I think it's only through the power of God that her death gave us even more passion to want to engage our surrounding community with just greater intensity and purpose and intentionality. And her death and the hope and the power of the resurrection inspired us and energized us to let's spend our time, our energy, who we are as a family, trying to make this city a better place that reflects the kingdom of God. So for 10 years, there have been some seasons that we've been probably, very complacent in how we try to live. But other seasons when I feel like we're clicking at a pace where we're trying to live as people in tune with God. I would say that the way I pray and the way I think over the last decade, I probably don't spend much time in my preaching or in my thinking about the destination or just trying to prepare people for eternity. I'm trying to prepare people for how the kingdom of God is manifesting itself in the here and now. And I don't think I have to minimize future and our eternity to do that, but that the kingdom of God is encouraging the church to be who God has called us to be now. And to do that, to get there, the more I think about Jesus and what Jesus means in my life, is just the power of the incarnation, that God's not just at the end trying to wave us closer and closer to God. God is in the now, trying to inspire us to what can we do today to shed light and shine light. And Jesus steps into the victories in this day, the valleys of our day, sometimes to deliver us, sometimes just to be with us.
Yeah.
You my faith than that. So.
It's good.
So good.
You want to add anything to that, Beverly?
Well, I think for me, and definitely just adding to that, I think Josh is absolutely right. I'm so much more focused on my grandchildren's faith than I am. This isn't going to roll off my tongue very well, but then I am even their health in my prayer life. I am praying like crazy that their faith will be strong no matter what happens to health. Of course, I pray protection, and I want them protected, but most of all, I want their faith protected. I love the verse where Jesus tells Peter, Simon, Simon, Satan's asked permission to sift you like wheat.
Mm-hmm.
But I prayed for you that your faith would fail.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get back up, go strengthen your brothers. And I think there's something so powerful in that we don't see Jesus, even in the prayers in John, praying over health as much as praying over faith and praying that we would walk this out well. And I think there's a shift in my own focus and in emphasis when my prayer life is spent over that. I have people, that ask me to pray over different things a lot, and I pray with my clients constantly. But I'm praying that the Lord gives them exactly what they need to walk out the road they've been called to walk.
That's
and
good.
That their heart don't miss what He's giving them. To walk that out, I want my prayer life to be more about faith than about their path.
That's good. I don't know if you've heard this before, but there's a preacher, pastor that I follow, and I'm sure y'all know who he is too, but Brian Zahn, I've heard him say, I want to make faith possible. He's your generation. So he says, I want to make possible for my kids and grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like that image in line, with what you're saying too, that we know that ultimately that's, if we know that we're walking towards this hope, that the living hope that as you mentioned earlier, that we can do a lot of things along the way to create some stumbling blocks that make that harder for generations that are coming behind us, or we can do some things that help prop up Christ in the best ways, so that hopefully that is faith, it makes faith possible for them. That we haven't, as Josh, as you were saying, we haven't expanded the list of all the things that they have to do correctly before they arrive at Christ. But that we've made Him more accessible, hopefully, through our living out of our faith. So I think that's good. And I think, to get to a point where our prayers are less over our health and more over faith and matters of faith is a worthy goal to aspire to, I think. So it's good. So you mentioned Romans 15:13. I'm curious, Beverly, and then Josh, I'll let you respond too. Are there other passages of Scripture that you think of that you would want that have resonated with you personally? Maybe even in the recent years, the last 10 years, but just even in your own faith journey, but that you might want to just share as a blessing to people as we wrap up.
Absolutely. The one that I've been sharing during the pandemic a lot is in Psalm 27. I remember when Josh probably first went to ACU, he called home and he said, Mom, if you could ask the Lord for one thing, what would it be? Well, I started my list. I want you to have faith, and I want you to marry someone of faith, and I want you to be happy. And he said, no, Mom, one thing. I thought, I think this might be a trick question. So I'm like, what would it be if I was going to ask the Lord for one thing? And he said, in Psalm 27, it says, one thing I ask of the Lord, and this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life and enjoy Him forever, basically. And I love that verse, that is so our tunnel vision. God, we want you. We want you. But then at the very end of that, there was a verse that I rejected for a little while after, probably a long while after Jenny died. I wasn't sure how this would happen for me. And at the very end of Psalm 27, it says this: I am confident of this, that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the alive. I will wait. Yes, I will wait on the Lord. And I couldn't picture how I would ever see the Lord's goodness without Jenny. But in this pandemic, I am a champion, and I'm speaking to everybody that will listen to me. It matters how we wait. It matters how we wait for the Lord. It matters how we wait in the pandemic. It matters what we're watching, what we're listening to, what spiritual disciplines we're practicing. It matters when you have one thing that you're seeking. It matters what you do while you wait for that one thing and while we're looking for the goodness of the Lord. And so I think we've got to really be tight right now as we are walking a hard path. And as we're waiting, and as we're trusting that we will see the goodness of the Lord again. And may the eyes of our heart and the hands of our heart be open to that we see his goodness even in the midst of.
That's good. Thank you for that.
Man, Luke 6 is a go-to for me where it talks about solitude, community, and ministry. I use that a lot to be that's what I gauge my spiritual health. I lead our staff in a time once a year based on Luke 6. I lead our staff in a conversation based on Luke 6. Matthew 14 has been a big one for me about the storms of life, and probably most of all Romans 8. Romans 8 is my go-to. I love it. I need it. I've tried to commit it to memory. I mean, Romans 8 has everything you need for life and godliness.
I'm this Sunday is week 3. I'm preaching a sermon series slowly through Romans 8. That's
okay. Yeah.
Next. So it's been great.
I've got an idea for you.
Okay.
You need to go on and look up Pepperdine Josh Ross.
Oh, I've seen it. I've seen it. Yeah.
Your church needs to see it. Everybody needs to see it. I mean,
is that then I'll have the pressure of having to memorize it like Josh did. So
just let him do it for you.
Yeah, that's true.
This is my buddy. That's what his dad did a few weeks ago. He preached 3 sermons through Romans 8, which is definitely a power-packed passage. But he just let Josh do it. And the crescendo and the passion which Josh speaks of as he quotes Romans 8 is just, it's so, so powerful.
Yeah, it's a good one. Very, very good. It is. It's all there too. I mean, it's a power-packed chapter. Mm-hmm. I said when I started the series, like, all of Scripture is God-breathed, but there's some places that kind of feel like they got a little extra breath, a little extra push there, So.
N.T. Wright said that if he could only have 2 chapters in the Bible for the rest of his life, it would be John 21 and Romans 8.
That's good.
John 20 and Romans 8.
Okay.
Love it.
That's good.
Well, if N.T. Wright said it.
That's right. It's probably true.
Yeah, right.
That's good. All right. So can people pre-order the book?
No, not the way we're doing this book, but it will be available September 1st. And then you'll be included in an email blast that we have with other friends and people just trying to get the word out. But beginning September 1st, it will be available through Amazon to buy a physical book or an ebook. And that's the place where you can get it. Everything is through Amazon for this book.
Right. So,
what does Amazon not own these days, right?
I think between them and Google and Apple, I think it pretty much runs the world. So,
yeah.
All right. So if you're watching and you're interested, be looking September the 1st, 2020. In case you're watching this at some point in the future, it's already out there. Maybe if you're watching in the future, but go check it out. It'll give you more about the stuff we've talked about here. Josh, Beverly, love you guys, and I appreciate y'all. And
yeah, we wanted to thank you ahead of time for buying a few hundred copies for your church. That really means a lot to us. Hey, Doug, man, it is an honor to have you as a friend, and I love the work you're doing there in the Kaufman area. So, man, thanks for having us on.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I was so proud of you, Doug. So proud of your church, and so proud of you. I've loved getting to watch that. So thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. All right, love y'all. Bye.
You too. Thank you.
See ya. Bye, guys.